Shalom, I'm Rabbi Michael Panitz. I'm the Rabbi of Temple Israel of Norfolk, Virginia, and I have the honor to be speaking to you at this time from the pulpit of my congregation. My subject matter at this time is entitled, What if the Stranger Were an Angel? What if the stranger were an angel? We have just experienced, perhaps for the last time, the night in the fall on which Americans, quote, turn the clock back and return from daylight time to standard time. Turn the clock back. As a Jew and as an historian, let me share with you how this phrase chills my soul. It has to do with how we treat the newcomer to our midst. I will show you what shameful deeds Americans have done on this score. But first, let's consider the psychology of relating to newcomers, and let's also connect this to our biblical heritage. That person over there, the one you don't yet know, what do you make of him? We eulogize certain people by recounting, he never knew a stranger, meaning that he befriended newcomers effortlessly. But we also teach our children stranger danger, because there are evil as well as good people in the world. So the question becomes one of a person's basic default assumptions about what a stranger is likely to be. Nations are like individuals. Some are more closed to outsiders, some are more open. At the most basic level, a level still more fundamental than the questions about jobs, about eligibility for social welfare, and about the likely political inclinations of new voters, the various national debates over immigration reflect this basic human choice. Open or closed stances are set points, generating the political decisions in their wake. Let's consider the story of Abraham and the three strangers, Genesis chapter 18. Seated in front of his tent in the hottest part of the day, Abraham sees three strangers approaching. Despite the heat, he springs into action, showing extraordinary hospitality to them, involving Sarah and his staff in an elaborate welcome for these visitors. We learn that they are no ordinary men. They are in fact messengers of God, sent to notify Abraham and Sarah that they would finally be blessed with a child, to rescue Lot and family from Sodom, and to destroy that capital city of evil. The story of Abraham and the strangers contrasts strongly with the next chapter in the biblical narrative, recounting the behavior of the men of Sodom towards the three angels. When the angels arrive, the townsfolk display reflexive xenophobia and become an angry lynch mob. The Bible often drives home its moral lessons by the juxtaposition of two narratives. Here the lesson is quite clear. Abraham's hospitality is the way to build a better future. The xenophobia of the men of Sodom is the path to destruction. I've been pondering this Bible lesson while thinking about the debate in contemporary America over admitting or restricting immigrants from various non-white Anglo-Saxon places of origin. But instead of getting people's partisan defenses all churned by speaking about the current decade, I'm going to take you back a century. The parallels are clear. By looking at the earlier time, one that rhymed with our own, we can hopefully gain the wisdom of hindsight. Since its founding, America had always been welcoming to immigrants. As it began its second century of independence, America was rapidly industrializing, and it needed millions of factory workers for its new economic engine. But almost immediately, opposition began to coalesce. Some of the opposition was economic. Union workers objected to greenhorns, as the newcomers were called, because they would work for less than what organized labor was fighting for. But much of the opposition was based on mere racial and religious prejudice. White European-descended Americans considered Asians unassimilable. Protestant Americans hated letting Catholics in. They spread the ugly canard that, by the mere fact of their Roman Catholicism, they were inherently disloyal to America, loyal rather to the pontiff in Italy. And for Jews, racist and religious bigots held special scorn. America had pro-immigration voices as well during this era of debate. Their iconic image was the Statue of Liberty, whose inscription had been penned by the Jewish poet Emma Lazarus in her sonnet, The New Colossus. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. But against this symbol of welcome, nativists counterposed their own symbols. One of the images dear to the nativists of that era was the wall. Again, an obvious rhyme to our own era. Nativists feared that there would be cracks in the wall, admitting, quote, undesirables, close quote, into the country, or that such people would scale the wall, bringing America down. The racist element of this opposition was right at the surface. You can see it in the caricatures, in cartoons of the era. Likewise, in his racist bestseller from 1916, The Passing of the Great Race, the eminent Columbia University professor Madison Grant wrote about the, quote, deracination of America, quote, as non-white Anglo-Saxon stock came into the country. After World War I, all these negatives coalesced into a so-called perfect storm. The post-war economic slowdown dampened the need for immigrant workers and solidified labor opposition to newcomers. The Warren G. Harding presidential administration turned its back on the progressive legacy of the preceding 2 decades, pledging to, quote, turn the clock back, hence my opening phrase in this message. The reinvigorated Ku Klux Klan was on its way to gaining 5 million members, and many candidates for office on both sides of the Mason-Dixon line could not be elected without Klan endorsement. On top of that all, there were indeed some anarchists and Bolsheviks in this country, eager to destroy the institutions of capitalism. In the atmosphere of suspicion and xenophobia, an American public over-signified the level of threat from those groups. In 1919, there was a series of bomb blasts aimed at industrialists and at the Attorney General, Mitchell Palmer. In response, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, then only a decade plus old, conducted a series of, quote, Palmer raids, cracking down on anarchist printing presses and libraries, going far beyond the legitimate anti-terrorist need of protecting the public. Against that backdrop of historical developments, Harding's victory in the 1920 election meant that both the presidency and the Congress were now in the hands of nativists. In 1921, Congress passed and the president signed unprecedented restrictions on immigration to America. Henceforth, only 3% of the number of any nationality as represented in the 1910 census would be allowed into the USA per year. This turned the flood of immigration into a trickle. But that was not good enough for the nativists. In 1924, they tightened the spigot still further. Now the percentage was lowered to 2%, and even more harmful to immigration. The census baseline year was pushed back to 1890, when there were far fewer non-Anglo-Saxons in the country. Japanese immigration was completely halted. We Jews know all too well the aftermath of this history. Within the decade, Hitler had come to power in Germany. Within the following half-decade, hundreds of thousands of German Jews, eager to flee, were unable to come to our country. While we did not murder the 6 million, our domestic policies were part of the reason that 163,000 German Jews were caught in the Nazi death trap, let alone the millions of other Jewish victims from Eastern Europe. Had the nativists not won in America in 1924, there would be generations of rescued immigrants, their children and descendants, building up this country, as did the lucky thousands who came here. To close the circle, let's think about our American history with the story of Abraham in mind. What if the strangers at our gate today are not simply, quote, the other, someone threatening to make us share our resources? What if they were angels? Not in the Renaissance painting meaning of the word, but people bearing God's messages. We Jews were strangers in this country only a few generations ago, and we became a blessing to the country. Our contributions to public health, to education, to the law, to social work, to all the upright professions, to the economy, even to the world of entertainment. All this has made America a better place. We Jews were the stranger, and we ended up being angels in that sense, messengers from God for blessing. No one could have seen it at the time, but that is what happened. Could we see today's stranger at the gate in the same light, as a potential blessing, as an angel? Indeed, why should that not be able to come to pass? I hope that we live up to the vision of our forefather Abraham, and I hope that what God promised him will come true through us. In the words that we read in this week's Torah portion, V'nivrechu v'cha, through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Amen.